Member for Gippsland.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And I rise to highlight an issue of enormous concern to Gippslanders, and I assume all members in this place, that being the issue of youth unemployment. Recently, a report was released titled How Young People Are Faring, and its findings in relation to employment outcomes for young people, particularly in regional areas, should be ringing alarm bells throughout the federal government and their state counterparts. In summary, the report found that the proportion of teenagers out of work increased from 12.2% in May last year to 18.5% in May this year. It also found that the number of people getting into apprenticeships or traineeships has declined. And I'd like to quote from an article in the Melbourne Age by Farah Thomason, a very talented education reporter of that newspaper. And I quote, "Experts say the findings should be a wake-up call for state and federal governments whose investment in education has failed to help those who need it most, disadvantaged students, Indigenous students and those in rural and regional communities." Goes on to quote, "The geographic areas where you have low-level participation also tend to be poor and in many cases have high Indigenous populations," said Melbourne University education expert Professor Jack Keating. "Yet we haven't made a lot of gains in those areas over the last decades. That's the crucial question. Can we find strategies to help get young people in those areas into education and training?" There's a lack of recent figures, Deputy Speaker, in relation to Gippsland. The last available that I could find was in October 2007 for youth unemployment, and so the unemployment rate at that stage, 15 to 19-year-olds, was 19.4%. And I fear it's much worse now. In fact, I fear it could be worse in terms of the hidden unemployment, with the number of young people being forced to leave my communities to obtain work from outside the region. The experience in particular in Morwell in the Latrobe Valley worries me greatly, Deputy Speaker, with the last available figures on the Federal Parliamentary website from December last year had the overall unemployment rate at Morwell of 7.7%, which is double the national average at that time. And it's in that context that I wrote to the Minister for Education, Employment and Workplace Relations and Social Inclusion in September this year, seeking an explanation as to why Gippsland was excluded from the program of local employment coordinators to assist with developing projects to stimulate employment opportunities. I'm yet to receive a response from the Minister in that regard, but I will be following it up with her because I believe the region, given its high unemployment rate, should have been one of the first to have been included in that particular program. I commend the government for the program, but ask the question why Gippsland wasn't in particular included in it. On a separate but related matter, Deputy Speaker, I will also be seeking explanation from the Minister for Families following a decision to cut the funding for specialised Centrelink officers to deal with young people. And it's been reported to me in the Latrobe Valley that unemployed youth are no longer able to access a specialised youth worker and receive the one-on-one service that they used to be able to receive in our region. Instead, I'm advised they must deal with whichever Centrelink officer is available at the time that they visit the relevant office. Now, this means that they may deal with different staff each time, and if anyone's familiar with the issues with youth unemployment, there's a lack of trust there to a large extent, and there needs to be an opportunity to build a relationship with the individual officer to manage the case. And I think it's a step backwards in terms of the high quality of service and support that was provided in the past. Locally qualified youth and social workers have contacted my office to report that the Centrelink staff used to be able to arrange courses or training for unemployed young people and provide that level of specialised support, which I think is very important and influential in helping some young people back on the right track. I'm told that the practice has now stopped, apparently due to reduced funding availability for the Centrelink officers. Now, I must say that I'm not here to criticise the individual Centrelink officers involved, because by and large, from my experience, my Centrelink officers in Gippsland do a remarkable job with often very difficult cases, and they're quite magnificent in the way they manage some quite awkward situations. But the young unemployed people do need a level of specialised assistance, particularly from my experience where they're coming from cases where they've come from a broken home, have experienced little adult supervision during their lives, and many also come from a background of almost institutionalised welfare dependency now. We have several generations of young people who have experienced several generations of unemployment in their families and don't actually have the great role models to turn to in terms of how they break the poverty cycle and get themselves engaged in our community. I think to break that cycle, we need to get those young people engaged in practical and productive work, and that offers the prospect of regular employment in the future. And I think the opportunity for specialised assistance through Centrelink is one of the avenues we need to explore more fully. Deputy Speaker, I believe that the decency of a job stands at the heart of our contract with young people in this place. We need to be continually striving to create the right economic environment for businesses to prosper and to hire young people in the future. And for those young people in my community who do need a helping hand, we need to have the appropriate support services in place in our regional locations to ensure that those young people are assisted and given every opportunity to achieve their absolute best. And I recommend that the government looks seriously at what youth support services are available through the Centrelink offices in the Gippsland region in order to assist those young people to achieve their best.